Hey there, YouTube. Welcome on back to Artichokedip. And this is a beautiful, quiet Sunday morning here for me. And I decided now would be a good time to get some gaming in. So that's what I am currently doing. And I'm hoping you guys are enjoying my game sessions through Ravenloft. And if you do, just click the like button. That lets me know you guys like the content. And if you're new here, or maybe the concept of solo RPG is new to you, or role-playing games altogether, it does not matter. I love this type of gaming, and as many people do. But anyways, with that out of the way, if you're new here and you just stumbled upon my channel, don't forget to click that subscribe button, followed by the bell icon, and every time I upload a new video, you'll get a notification so you do not miss one. So let's get into the meat and potatoes of this thing. So in the last game session, the characters found themselves in a very precarious situation. They had found the severely damaged wagon that was on fire, and before they could investigate any further to get answers to their questions, it was at that point they realized they were not alone. A gentleman that appeared to be a figure of authority at that point. I keep saying that word at that point. I'm sorry, and I don't know why I do it. It's just like it's a new, for whatever reason. That's a new phrase that has popped up in my vocabulary I'm trying to get rid of here. Anyways, so he had offered them some food and shelter from the storm. Only thing they had to do was lower their weapons and follow him to their destination point. And that's where this game session picks up, and we'll continue on. As they are moving through the thick, blinding mist and the blowing snow that seems to be relentless with a biting cold that's just chilling them to the bone. My characters, Bjorn, Talu, and Ezekiel, are followed by several of the nomads that are dragging the deer carcass behind them. And there are a couple. Oh, he's got a bent spear. Let me straighten that out. A couple which lead the way. And directly in front of them, the chief. Or so they think it's the chief. I'm going to see. I'm going to roll against his wisdom for a perception check. And I get a +1 to that. And currently the target number will be 11. Let me see what I get. Right on 11. So Bjorn's surveying the situation, and he's watching the overall body language of what he can see through the thick fog of everybody to get a meter, if you will, of the threat level in which they're in. And he notices everybody's pretty relaxed. Nobody's acting, looking out of the corner of their eyes at them, getting ready to, at that point, attack them. They all seem to be quite intent on getting to their location and getting out of the cold. Bjorn kind of takes a sigh of relief, and as they're walking along, he looks over his shoulder back at Talu, and he says, I think we're finally going to be okay. At least some a warm fire, some hot food, I think will do us good. I think we've all deserved that. I'm going to see how Talu reacts to this. I'm going to roll same thing, target 11 against his charisma. I get a +1. Oh, 15. Okay. Talu replies to him and says, "Yes, my friend, it would appear that our situation is definitely improving for the better. But keep your eyes up ahead of you. We have no idea where we're at, who these people are, what they really truly want, or anything else. So at this point, we're still looking for survivors ordered by our king, King Huvar." The NPC overhears their conversation and says, "Don't worry, we haven't seen any other survivors come through here. We've only seen you. And believe me, you probably won't see them. Not trying to say that to scare you, my friends. Just don't hold any hope where there is none." Alright. Stage is set. Now what I want to see is if there's an encounter. I'm going to roll on my percentile dice here, and the higher the number, the higher the percentage there is an encounter. 0, 9, nothing. Uneventful. To my character's surprise, after what seems like an endless march through a complete whiteout of snow and fog, it begins to thin, and they come out of this, what fog is almost thick as pea soup from the tree line of the forest, into a village. It is night at this time, and there's not a whole lot of activity. The only thing that they can currently see is a few nomads scurrying about doing their nightly chores, moving from one hut to the next, but nothing of significance to really take note of. The chieftain stops and he motions to the rest of the group to continue on without him, and they continue about their duties, leaving him alone with the characters. He says, "I just remembered," he says, "it's terribly impolite to not tell you my name." He says, "My name is Theodis. And like you, I'm not from here. I came here, I can't even tell you when." He says, "When I asked you the question as to which realm you're from, do you not remember that?" And Bjorn looks at him and he's like, "Of course." He says, "But this is Huvar." He says, "No, I'm sorry." And he says, "Your name?" He says, "I'm Bjorn." He says, "Bjorn, no, I'm afraid I don't want to tell you a whole lot at this point, because you have so much on your mind already, I can only imagine." He said, "But what I can tell you, this is not Huvar. You're no longer in the realm of Toril. I'm no longer in the realm of Glaranthia. I don't know which realm this is, but all I know is it is." And he says, "Enough chitter chatter. Let's get to the main hall and get you fed and get you some warmth of a fire." He says, "Please follow me." Theodis at that point leads them to the great hall. Okay, give me time to get my... Let me turn this so it's better camera view. So at this point, sorry, I said it again. So they enter into the Great Hall. Theodos, at that point, raises his arms and he says, "Welcome to my humble abode. Please seat yourself at the great table by the warmth of the fire. I will see hot food is served immediately." He snaps his fingers and servants come into the great hall. He makes his way over to his throne area, and as he sits down into his throne, he has brought a large goblet and their pitcher, which is pouring a liquid into it. Let me see which... So I'm going to roll a spot check to see if he can... Okay, no, he doesn't. So Ezekiel is like, "Is that ale, good sir?" Theodos takes a large drink out of his goblet and he looks over at him and he says, "Ale, no, sorry." He says, "We have no ingredients here for ale. Our summers don't last that long. But what we do get is we get plentiful of grapes and a large variety of them. We have wine, very fine wine." Point, Ezekiel's like, "Wine? Wine's not bad." He says, "Of course," and he motions to the table. At that point, my characters are all sat at the table. They're brought a stew fashioned of... It's a venison stew with large goblets of wine that's poured to them. And the servants in the chamber also bring heavy fur blankets and put them over them to begin to warm them up. And as they're sitting there eating the hot stew, and they realize at this point just how cold they actually are. They can feel their skin at that point, like 1,000 needles burrowing into them from the cold, and they begin to shiver. Theodos, he nods in agreement, watching the reactions as you can see him warming up and staring into his goblet and drinking it and enjoying his wine. Now it's time to bring in a new NPC, because I think it's at this point, needless to say, but I will say it anyways, they have crossed over the threshold into the realm of Ravenloft. I want to see... I'm going to leave it up to a dice roll here. I'm going to roll one for Talu. My target number is going to be 11. He's got a +1 to his wisdom. Nope, he does not get it. He gets a 7. Bjorn, he gets a +1. And he got an 11, so Bjorn did notice it. And just for curiosity's sake, I'll do Ezekiel too. 17. Okay, Ezekiel noticed it first, then glad I did that. So as they're eating their stew and beginning to warm up and feeling the warmth of the abode and the fire and all the good smells, and Ezekiel has been admiring this area over here, which appears to be an effigy of a deity possibly, but to his surprise there is green ivy, living ivy, which is growing on it, and there are white flowers which have bloomed and opened. As he's admiring it, he notices somebody step out from behind the effigy. very delicately admiring the flowers and looking at the petals. And he immediately notices that it's not, she's not full elf, but she's not full human as well. Ezekiel looks over at Bjorn, and Bjorn sees her too and looks over at him and shrugs his shoulders like, I don't know. And goes back to eating his stew. Theodos looks over from his throne and he says, Nita, my dear. He said, I hope everything was well for you tonight while we were out on the hunt. She, still admiring the petals of the ivy bloom, she says, of course, my lord. Why wouldn't it be? She says, and the hunt was successful? He said, absolutely, just as you foresaw it. He said, he looked over at my characters and he says, pardon me. He says, you have to understand. He says, I don't have the best manners in the world. He said, please meet Nita. Nita has special gifts like you. She's not from this world, and she strayed in here as a child, and I have raised her like a daughter of my own. He says, Nita has special gifts. She has the gift of foresight, which, well, for a man in my position could be a very helpful thing from time to time. But you need not worry. She will not do anything evil to you, I promise. Nita slowly makes her way over to where the fire is in the large pot of boiling stew and grabs a ladle and ladles some stew out and puts it into a big earthen bowl. And she walks over to the table, and as she's looking at Ezekiel, making eye contact with him, Ezekiel is kind of taken back. Even though she's half elf, there's something about her eyes that are just completely hypnotic and alluring. Her eyes are as if they're a deep, crystal clear blue lake that you can see the bottom of from the shore all the way out hundreds of feet. As she approaches, she looks at him and she says, you look weary from your travels, and you look as if you've been out into the cold too long. She says, please, eat some more stew. I think you will need it. You will be safe here from now. Don't worry. She sets the bowl of stew down and slides it over to Ezekiel. I want to see how Ezekiel, his reaction to this. So we're going to roll out the old charisma. Even though he has a -2 to elves, let's see. Rolled an 11? Okay, so Ezekiel looks at the stew and looks up at her and he says, I thank you, but I think one bowl will suffice me enough. He says, maybe my friend Bjorn here, he'll entertain the thought of more stew. He can never seem to get enough to eat. I want to see how Ezekiel. Bjorn at that point, he's just like, the mouthful of stew. He's like, I'm good. He goes back to eating. Talu. Talu sitting there, and he's spooning up the last remnants of his stew and looking at both of them, and he's just like, he stands up and leans over and scarfs the bowl of stew away from him and just starts hungrily gobbling it down. Nita chuckles for a moment and she's like, I knew one of you were very hungry. I just thought it was you. She says, so tell me your name. Let me see how Ezekiel's gonna... He's kind of like standoffish of her. Oh. He's like, my name? He says, my name is Ezekiel. What more do you need to know from me? Nita, at that point, she kind of repostures herself and she says, I can see you you still hold grudges against our two races, and I can only tell you, Master Dwarf, where you are now, allies are very few and very far in between, and the ones that you do have, you have to cherish them and take care of them. I don't want you to... I guess the best way I can say this, Master Dwarf, is you're going to have to let go of some of your old thoughts while you are here. Ezekiel says, well, I don't think we will be here long. We'll be returning to our kingdom shortly. Nita nods and says, she looks over her shoulder back at Theodos, and Theodos shakes his head no and goes back to drinking his wine. And Nita nods to him and quietly, and she says, enjoy your food and the warmth, and I hope you get plenty of rest tonight. You certainly have deserved it, and you look like you need it. Ezekiel nods to her and says, thank you, and slowly goes back to eating his stew, eyeing her suspiciously as she walks away. Very interesting. As Nita approaches the throne, she says to Theodos, you are going to tell them, are you? And Theodos says, all in good time. All in good time. They have a lot on their minds already. Let them enjoy the food and the warmth and the good night's sleep. They have enough to think about. I don't want to trouble their sleep with anything further. He said, have you looked into the star conjuncture? And Nita says, yes. The planetary alignments have moved. The gate will close before sunrise. And Theodos says, yes, and we'll be sealed in here for another lifetime. He says, thank you, Nita, and if anything changes, please let me know. Nita nods at him and she says, of course, Father, and returns back to her studies, we will say. After they have a hearty dinner and they're given plenty of wine, Theodos says, please, my friends, he said, I will have accommodations made for you by a warm fire to where you'll get a very peaceful night's rest and you won't have to worry about a chill in your slumber. He says, but for me, it's been a long day and I feel as if I am ready to turn in. So please, eat stew until your heart is desired. Drink as much wine. There's no shortage of that. Until your heart is desired, and my servants are right now currently preparing your quarters for you, and you shall have those shortly. It's at this point that, sorry, I keep saying that. My characters retire to their chambers that have been set up for them. And as promised, there's a roaring fire, and from a safe distance from the warm hearth of this fire that's blazing away are several layers of thick fur bedding that they find themselves in. As they are sitting in a quiet moment of silence, Ezekiel breaks the silence by saying, I've been giving a lot of thought to what Nita said, and she's correct. If in fact we are no longer in Huvar or our realm, any friends that we would have, or companions, allies, whichever you want to call them, we should at that point embrace and feel lucky that we have them. I feel as if she's right, and maybe we'd have to let some of the past grudges go and just accept it for what it is. Bjorn scoffs and he says, he says, I don't think that's at all. He says, what I think is going on here, brother. He says, I feel as if the kingdom of Huvar may be under war, under siege right now, and this is the enemy. They've sent these spies out to, at this point, twist our minds, turn us against the king, turn us against our clansmen, and that's what I think we're at. He says, so don't be so swift, my friend, to, at that point, befriend that half-elf. You never know. I guarantee you there's something about her. Something that's not right. But me and Talu over there being your closest comrades that you have, if you feel the need to abandon us to go and befriend the elf, by all means, have at it. Talu, laying back, looks out of the corner of his eye at both of them, admiring one of his daggers and the reflection of the firelight off of the well-polished blade. He says, let me tell you something, friends. Loyalty is bought, and with enough money, enough power, or the right agenda, anybody's loyalties can be changed. And he says nobody's loyal to anybody. He says, I know in my line of business, that's the way it is. Ezekiel shakes his head and he says, spoken like a true assassin would. He says, and that's not what I'm talking about. What I am talking about here is, what if what they're saying is true and we are no longer in Huvar? We are alone, cut off. We know nothing about these lands. None of the threats. Nothing. And so far, these people have shown us nothing but hospitality and kindness. And he says, I feel as if it would be a detriment to our position in order to show them otherwise. Bjorn, at that point, grabs a big fur thick blanket and pulls it over himself, and he says, do what you want to do. He says, I'm going to stay true to the king and stay true to my course in which the king has sent me out, and that is to find survivors that are lost out into the cold. Lucky for us, We have been given a reprieve and some shelter, hot food, and I have to admit, some pretty good wine, even though I would prefer a fine dwarven ale. The wine will suffice. He said, "Good night, brother." As Bjorn and Talu drift off into sleep, Ezekiel sits and stares at the fire, closes his eyes, and attempts a prayer to Odin. I want to see if his prayer will be answered. I'm going to roll my percentage die. Ooh. Oh, that's very low. As he closes his eyes and meditates and focuses in calls to Odin, his mind is filled with an empty blackness, still as the darkest night, with no stars in the sky. As he opens up his eyes and stares back into the flames of the fire, he realizes how tired he actually is. And at that point, slumps back into his bedding and pulls the blanket over himself, drifts off to sleep. All right. So 2 hours have passed. I want to see if there's any encounters. Nope. Another 3 hours, so they've been asleep for 5. Oh, 90%. Yeah, that'll work. My characters are stirred from their slumber, and they hear commotion coming from the main chamber area. As one by one they awake from their deep slumber, Bjorn sits up, readies his battle axe, and cautiously approaches the door. Talu and Ezekiel follow his lead, and as he gets closer to the door, he puts his ear to the door to see if he can hear what may be going on in the next room. And let me roll a perception check and see. He cannot hear any discernible words. He can just hear tones of voices in which sounds like possibly a argument. He quietly and carefully opens up the door. He can see Nita and Theodis. They both look, their body language is that of, they are worried that they may be in danger. Bjorn puffs up his chest with his battle axe in hand and walks out and says, "Lord Theodis, Do you need any help with the situation? He hears a ranting, almost delirious type of babble that's coming from this direction, and as he turns, he can see a human, and he automatically recognizes the armor work, and that is of the Thieves Guild of the Crimson Dawn. The man is screaming at Theodos. This is some kind of illusion. This is some kind of magic at work here. Don't even tell me that I am no longer in Huvar. I know where I am, and I know where the kingdom is, and I know which realm. He says, tell me now, or I'm going to kill you just like I killed your guards. Nita, as she cautiously starts to approach, Theodos puts his arm out, looks out of the corner of his eye at her, and motions her to get behind him. As he brings his hand back, it's hovering over his sword. He looks over at Bjorn and says, evidently, before the gate closed that you came through, this gentleman came through. He does not believe he is no longer in Toro. Perhaps you should talk to him. Bjorn nods at him. Aye. Bjorn begins to walk towards him. His eyes grow huge and he screams, "Great! A dwarf! And not only that, a Bavarian dwarf just to make things better." He says, "You're in on this illusion as well, are you not?" Bjorn tells him, he says, taking a firm grip onto his axe, he says, "Listen, the last thing I want to do is kill you, and believe me, I would enjoy to kill you. But I can tell you this. So far this man has shown us no ill will, but you, holding that bloody saber in your hand, have. For therefore, that makes you my enemy." I want to see how he reacts to that. His eyes grow huge and he begins to scream at obscenities at him. "You dwarven filth! You dwarven!" Bjorn just shakes his head and he says, "I warned you. Now it's time to die." As Bjorn moves in on him, let's see who gets the first attack here. So let me roll 2 10-siders. Ooh, that ain't good. He does. He wildly swings the saber and comes nowhere near hitting Bjorn and stumbles momentarily on his feet. Bjorn. Oh yeah, that's a 19. This is going to be good. Bjorn takes his battle axe and quickly, as he comes across his abdomen, slicing it open, the man stumbles backwards to his back. And he is laying on the floor and coughing up blood as his entrails are beginning to ooze out the gaping wound. Bjorn walks up to him as he's standing over him. He says, "Let me explain something to you. You thieves, you filth. You feel as if you're better than me." And he says, "You're not." He says, "I serve the king, and I serve the king well. For my actions in battle have proven so, and yours have put you exactly where you belong. Ready to be buried within the earth with the rest of the worms where you belong." I want to see how Ezekiel is going to react to this. Ezekiel storms into the center of the great hall, and he screams at him. He's like, "Stop!" He says, "By the Lord of Odin," he says, "what you are about to do," he says, "is not right against your fellow man." Bjorn looks over at him and he says, "Really? The man tried to kill me. The man killed 3 of his guards. But you want to protect him? You think Odin's going to find some kind of pity upon his spirit?" He says, "I don't know about that." Talu walks up next to Bjorn, and as he's looking up at Bjorn, he looks down at the man lying in a pool of his own blood now. He says, "Give me a moment with this one, brother. For that, I got a little score to settle." Bjorn says, "Take all the time you need." He says, "It's under control." Ezekiel pulls a dagger out, and as he stands above the man, and as he's clinging on to what little life he has left, Ezekiel can see the obvious terror and fear in his eyes. Ezekiel kneels down next to him and he says, "So it is at this point, as you can see, what they say is true, brother. There is no honor amongst thieves, and even less with assassins." As he grins, he says, "But what I can say is your kind have killed many of my brethren, and now you bring it to these people." He says, "That just cannot do. It just will not happen here. And for that, I come bearing a gift." He takes the dagger and thrusts it into his neck. And the man, at that point, ceases to breathe. I want to see now. I'm going to have Talu search him and see if there's anything on him that can be used. DC of 11. Let me see what he gets. A 1. So as Talu is rifling through the pouches that he has and his items, he is just quickly finding out that this man didn't have much of anything on him whatsoever. Bjorn turns his attention towards Theodis, and Bjorn in a booming voice says, "Enough of this treachery and this deceit." And he says, "I know for a fact, absolute fact, we have been at war with the Crimson Dawn for a while. Are you working with the Crimson Dawn, and this was a plant put here just to deceive us and turn us against our king? He says, tell me now. And as he approaches, Ezekiel puts his hand out and pushes him on his chest. He says, stop, Bjorn, before you go too far. Theodos looks at him and he says, thank you, my friend Ezekiel, but I think he is correct. He deserves an explanation. Turns his attention towards Nita and he says, well, go back to your chambers and try to get some rest, my daughter. He says, it's going to be a late night. He said, and there's no need for you to stick around. And Nita says, I think it might be beneficial to you if I do. Theodos nods his head and says, okay. Theodos walks over to his throne, and in a hidden compartment, he opens it up, and underneath the floor he reaches in and he grabs a large bronze shield and pulls out a large scroll. I want to see how Bjorn, his reaction to this. When Bjorn sees the large bronze shield, his eyes widen, and he says, by the gods, I have never seen bronze work like that. That is amazing. Theodos chuckles as he walks to the great hall table, and he says, yes, Master Dwarf. And he sets the shield down. He's like, this was standard equipment from the world in which I came from. He sets the large rolled up scroll on the table next to it. He says, please admire it if you want to. Bjorn and Ezekiel admire the shield. Ezekiel says, is this the symbol on the shield? Is it a divinity? And it's at that point, Theodos nods and he says, yes, it's of my deity, Apollyon. He says, but I have not heard from him in many years now. He says, and I feel as if I probably never will again. And every time I try to pray to him, what answered me was just dark. And I just stopped praying. As Ezekiel and Bjorn are admiring the craftsmanship of the shield and looking at it, he unrolls the scroll, and it's a large map. As Talu walks over to the table, sheathing his dagger, and he says, worthless thief. Just a peasant, really. Had nothing of value on him. He said, nothing, Bjorn. I would think if he was a plant or he was sent here, he would at least have something, a map, a key, something. He had nothing, absolutely nothing. He says, but he did have the tattoo of the Crimson Dawn on him. But by looking at it, I would have to say he's initiate level. Probably just somebody in the wrong place at the wrong time. And Talu says, oh, wow. Look at that shield. And Bjorn says, yes, brother. As he hands it to him, Talu grabs it and he's eyeing it with amazement, looking at the construction. Theodos unrolls the scroll, and they see this map. my characters or eyes are like, what is that? He says, this is the reason why I wanted to save this conversation till tomorrow and let you have a full night's rest and not burden you with it. But I can see you wouldn't have had a peaceful night's rest, Bjorn, without it, so might as well put your mind to rest. He says, this is the realm in which I came from. It's called Glaranthia. He says, there I served underneath the Emperor, like you, as you would put it, a commander. There was 300 legions underneath the Emperor. I was in the 15th Legion. Something strange began to happen. We had weird weather anomalies and a bizarre cold snap that seemed to come out of nowhere. Heavy mists, heavy fog, weird star alignments in the skies at night, profane to the gods themselves, and then followed by weird, eerie, dancing green lights on the horizons. After 3 legions have completely disappeared, it was at that point the Emperor sent my legion, the 15th Legion, out to go and investigate and report back to the Emperor our findings. Like you, Bjorn, we ventured out into the foggy mists. I lost my entire legion. It wasn't until my legion was all but depleted, and not too far from here, we had found it appears to be an ancient ruin site. It proved to be extremely fatal for my legion. Me and a couple of my companions were able to flee. That's where I met these good people. The ancient chief then showed me hospitality like I showed you. It didn't take me long, and I learned the language of these people. And one night, a giant bear came into the village. It had attacked and killed and maimed many people. I alone, taking my sword, my shield, faced off with the bear and slain it. At that point, I gained a respect and a rank amongst these nomad warriors. And they are proud, fierce men. I know dwarves can have a certain level of fearsome to them, but I'm proud to serve next to them. And it wasn't too long after the chieftain had passed, they voted me chieftain. And I gladly accepted that. Many times I have tried to look for answers, trying to find my way back home, a portal, something. I'll hear rumors here and there, and nothing ever pans out. And then one day, when the portal was opened, or gate, whatever you want to refer to it as, a young little girl, half-elven girl, had stumbled into our village, badly wounded, starved, and terrified. And he motions to Nita. Nita came to me. Nita nods her head and smiles, and she says, "That's correct, Father." He says, "But even though she's not my true birth by right daughter, I raised her as my daughter, and I love her as a daughter no less. Like her, she has spent much time studying the stars, the heavens, and this place. She has the gift of foresight, which helps us in a lot of problems. Unfortunately, this one, well, we knew the gate was going to be open, but we didn't foresee this threat that you have so victoriously taken care of for me." He says, "I am in debt to you, Bjorn. I feared for Nita's life and feared what he would do. And the unfortunate thing is, I have 3 men 3 good men that are now dead as a result of him. He says, I can help you as much as you would like me to help you. He says, but to get answers as to what this place is, where this place is, he says, I am still searching for those myself. He says, but please don't take this too harshly, Master Bjorn. I first have to gain your trust, and I must gain your trust as well before I can divulge any more information. I, like you, will be seeking answers. There's a few things I can give you and point you in some directions, because I imagine right now you still do not believe that you are in a completely different realm. But our winter is coming to an end here very quickly, and the summers are very short, but the paths will open up. I'll give you a map and I'll lead you the way. There'll be more than enough evidence for you to see to convince you otherwise. He says, so, as you can see, Master Bjorn, this I didn't want to lay upon your mind before you went into a much needed slumber. Bjorn, I want to see how Bjorn reacts to this. Bjorn looks at Theodis and he scoffs and says, Dribble, it's deceit, it's treachery. I'm telling you, it's treachery. Ezekiel cuts in and with a raised voice screams at Bjorn, it's not treachery, Bjorn. It's truth. It's absolute truth. I tried praying to Odin. I could not reach him. He would not answer me. Bjorn looks at him and he says, but you are a cleric of Odin. Of course he would answer you. He says, no, Bjorn. After you guys had fell asleep, I tried praying. I'll try again in the morning. Perhaps, maybe he'll answer me then. Nita makes her way over to Ezekiel, puts her hand on his shoulder and says, Master Ezekiel, there is a tree. I call it the divining tree. It's in a sacred location here, and it's very close. I can take you there. It almost acts like a amplifier, if you will. You may be able to reach your God there. I can't make you any promises, but I'd be more than happy to take you there for you to talk with your God. Ezekiel, looking over his shoulder at her, nods in agreement. He says, thank you, Nita. Thank you very much. He turns his attention towards Bjorn and looks him in the eye and he says, Bjorn, we have to give the thought that we are no longer in Uvar. I know you don't want to believe that, but what other choice do we have, Bjorn? Talu, nodding his head, looks over at Bjorn and he says, Ezekiel speaks words of truth. Looking at this ramble I have back here behind me, there'd be no way, Bjorn, they would have sent him in here to infiltrate this place. His training isn't even complete. He's an initiate. He says he could barely pick a pocket, let alone anything else. And I said, look at him. Look how delirious he was. He says, you do what you want, Bjorn. I'm with Ezekiel. Anyways, he says, I think I'm going to go find me some of that wine. I'm pretty thirsty after all of this. Theodos says, of course, my friend. He says, as much as you would like. He says, I think I will join you with a goblet of wine. I'm gonna close my gaming session out. That's, yes, I enjoyed this session. It was pretty fun. I always like interacting with the NPCs and using them to my advantage to enrich in the storyline and bring more to the story. But how this gaming session is going to end is the characters sit at the table in the Great Hall, drinking wine and reminiscing about the realms from which they came from and the memories of old. Theodos and his military achievements in the 15th Legion. Nita remembering the farm she grew up on, and her father teaching her the secret names of the elements of Earth, which could help her unlock mysteries behind the natural world. And her loving mother that always seemed to know the right thing to say at the right time, to always make her feel comfortable and warm. And then the winter, when the green lights came. Alright, my friends, that's where I'm going to end this gaming session. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you do, please click that like button and let me know. And if you have not subscribed, you're new here, don't forget, click the subscribe button, followed by the bell icon. You'll get a notification every time I upload a new video. Alright, game on, my friends.